Well, every road I see leads away from me. There's not a single one that leads me home. The road keeps saying, friend, come see what's round the bend. So is it any wonder that I roam? All the places I have been keep calling me back again. Down in the pines I hear the cold winds blow. My heart keeps telling me, footloose and fancy free, and the road goes by and calls me as it goes. Well, maybe somewhere there's a someone waiting with a smile, and maybe there'll be some place I can stop and rest a while. And maybe you weren't meant to be just a rolling stone, and there's a road to travel on that leads you back to home.
Well, here we are. I just about forgot this is my chat. I got to start talking.
I'm just here to read the comments.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Just here so I don't get fined.
Yeah. So anyway, everybody, welcome back to Tales of the Trails once again. If you're wondering what this thing is I got on my head, I just got this in today. I bought it from the reenactor. 1872 Cavalry dress helmet. And so in 1872, the early ones, they had this part that swept down on the back there. Of course, the horsehair plume. The artillery would have one similar to this. I got to put my other hat on so my hair don't get my eyes. Artillery would have about the same thing, only theirs was all in red. But the infantry had a shako with a little pom-pom thing up on top of it. Nice thing about this one, the helmet itself is reproduction, but the eagle and that spike are original from what I was told, and then the brass on the side here, because there's not anybody out there that makes original brass. But anyway, thought I'd show that off on there. Bings, this one just come in today. This is kind of my pride and joy. I got to replace the cords. The cords are actually 1880s before they went to the other style of helmet that basically has the same shape on the back. On the visor, it doesn't come all the way down. It's the same shape in the back as well. Yeah, I just thought I'd show this off right quick here. So as this usually goes, is we start out, for those of you that may be coming in new, is Garrett starts reading the comments, and then we kind of get started. And I should have went to the bathroom beforehand, but I'm going to let Garrett read the comments. I'm going to run to the bathroom, and then we'll be back and get started.
Okay. All right, so we have Diane Houston is in. She says, good evening, all. Hi, Diane. Louisiana Gray says, good evening, fellas. Can't wait to hear some more history. Me neither. I kind of badgered him to do Santa Fe Trail quite a while back, and we're finally getting to it. Oregon Outback said, howdy from the Outback. Temps dropping, feels like snow. We had about 9 inches of snow just last weekend. That was kind of exciting for Kansas, Oklahoma. Stephen M. Mann said, the Mountain Man is here. Louisiana Gray said, good evening, Duke. Patiently waiting. AR American says, good evening, guys. Go check out his video he posted just today of the Henry Mare's Leg. Did it with drone footage, horseback footage. Let me see here.
Oh, he's getting fancy then.
Oh, yeah, it's really excellent video. Kodak Tackman says, evening, y'all. Goss Loco says, good evening. Kodak Tackman says, a little lonely over here. Well, hopefully more people are jumping in, guys. Don't worry, I read both the channel's comments. I was going to put this just on Duke's, and I accidentally put it on both of them.
Get more viewers that way.
Chris Klein, yeah, we have over 40 right now. Chris Klein says, hello, all. Doug Duke says, hope you are well, Duke. Texan 1836 says, howdy. Jeremy P says, howdy, everybody. Hardy said, hello, you silly humans. Earl Shiner said, good evening from Syracuse, New York. Brother and everyone else. Black Chowder says, hello. Hardy said he wasn't expecting the hat. Oregon Outback said, that's some fancy headgear. The Saboteur 45's in.
Hey.
Desert Rat 45 said, that looks like Prussian influence. Garza Vlog said, good evening. Doug Dukes wants to know where you got the helmet, and you can answer that in just a second. CBJW says hi. AR American said, thanks, Garrett. Appreciate it. Everything Black Powder. Jake is in, says howdy, boys. So if you want to go back to Doug Dukes wants to know where you got that helmet.
Yeah, so I was on Facebook one morning, and a guy had posted the picture of that on one of the groups I'm following on Facebook. And said it was 7 5/8, and I sent him a message, and now it's here. But yeah,
green, is that green dyed leather inside in the back of the back bill? Or
no, this is a felt hat, and I don't know. I honestly, I do not know what this green is.
Yeah,
but
is this is a harder substance.
Yeah, this is a felt hat. It's a hard felt. We have had, they have a bunch up there at Fort Laramie, and they never had one in my size. But this one was 7 5/8, and I just decided that I couldn't live without it. Because you can't find them anymore. Nobody's making them. I did get a quote to get one made. If I remember right, the quote was $600. And that was just for the felt. That doesn't come with all the hardware. Then I'd have to go and buy the hardware for it. And so I decided that I was going to go ahead and pay this. I mean, it was still a little spendy, but got it for a pretty good price, I thought. And I don't know if I'll ever go back up to Fort Laramie or ever do 1870s again, but I thought, you know what, I'm going to get this just in case I do. I'll have a dress helmet, because that was one problem at Fort Laramie. I always had to play in an officer at special events where we wore dress uniforms, because that was the only complete uniform I could put together was an officer's. And they had one helmet up there that somewhat fit me, but it never really did fit right. It was just a little too small, but I could get it on, get the chin strip down, and keep it on. But now I've got one that'll fit just right. So my next project is to buy the dress coat that goes with it. And there's one lady that makes them, and I'm going to get in touch with her soon about getting one of those, and before she goes out of business. And the pants I can get from any of the reenactor places that sell them. And so I'll be finally getting my thing set up to be a corporal of Company K of the 2nd U.S. Cavalry.
Well, even if you don't ever reenact 1870s, you'll be well set for Halloweens, funerals, or weddings.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, show up to that, and I'll show up to a wedding and that. Yeah, that might get me kicked out of the wedding. But anyway, yeah, so I just got it through private purchase. It just happened to be the luck of the draw. I just happened to get it. So they're out there. Unfortunately, like I said, the people that were making them, they're not making them anymore. Because unfortunately, in the reenactor world, a lot of that time period they're not focusing on anymore. Civil War still does good, but the 1870s is not a lot of reenactor groups. The last group that I can think of used to be the Chowder Society, I think is what it was called. They did infantry from the 1870s and such, and there are a few groups up there, but they're nothing like they were back in the 70s and the 80s and 90s.
It's not as popular anymore. It's too political.
Yeah, well, wasn't gonna go there, but yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, Garrett. It is starting to, there's politics involved in it, and people just aren't as interested in it.
I am.
Right. We are. And reenacting in general, I mean, it's just there's not that much interest. A lot of times when you go to reenactments, now I don't know about back east with Civil War stuff, but you go out to the ones out here, very few young folks. Most of them are older folks. The last one I did up at Fort Laramie, we did have a handful of youngsters that were starting to get into it, but most of them are my age and up. Mm-hmm. And so It just, yeah, there's not that much interest, and it's everywhere. When I worked at Bent's Fort, we had the same thing. Most of the guys that come in and did those living history events, is what we called them, not really reenactments, living history events, most of them were, had been doing it since the 70s, the 80s, and there weren't a whole lot of real young ones wanting to do it. But
I will say Hardy commented and he said, if he gets married and you show up in full dress uniform of 1870 Cav, you're instantly best man.
I'll keep that in mind. You gotta get married west of the Mississippi.
Yep.
So anyway,
talk about your other fort. Seeing as that's what we're discussing.
Right. So which one are we discussing?
You promised me Santa Fe Trail. I asked for Santa Fe Trail 6 months ago.
Yeah, we are going to finally touch on Santa Fe Trail because I thought I was going to be going to Wyoming this week, do a little hunting, and the guy that I go up, my friend, he got COVID, and so decided to stay this week. Plus, they got snow up there, and just wasn't going to be a good time. So I stayed home, and we decided we was going to do this one tonight. And I was sitting there, I was like, what am I going to talk about? I ain't got time to read. And Garrett said, let's do Santa Fe Trail. And I said, yep, I don't have to read on that one too much. It got burned in my head for 7 years, 6 years, 7 seasons, whatever it was. I know it got burned into my head a lot. So there's a lot there. There's a lot that I don't know. I'm going to tell you right now, after a certain time period, it goes away because that's all I studied up for when I was working at Bent's Fort. But we're going to hit much of it as we can tonight. What I should have done, though, is should have went and got all my books. I can still do that here in a second when we take a break and Garrett reads comments all because they're just right over here. But yeah, we're going to do Santa Fe Trail. So if there's no other comments that have popped up here in the last 30 seconds, 2 minutes, whatever it's been.
There are, but I've got them marked where I stopped, and I'll hit
Gotcha.
them up whenever we get to the break.
All right. So going to start on the Santa Fe Trail. Means this is Tales of the Trails. So the Santa Fe Trail, really, it gets its start in 1821. So a couple of years ago was the 200th anniversary. They had a big shindig down there at Bent's Fort about it. Gets started 1821, and the reason why it gets started in that year is because that's also corresponds with Mexico gaining independence from Spain. So prior to that, Spain had an embargo on the United States, and it kind of ties into the Louisiana Purchase. So when we bought the Louisiana Territory, the boundary between the U.S. or between what was then French territory and Spanish territory wasn't really clear. And when the United States bought it, it still wasn't really clear. And so Spain's got a firm hold, doesn't want to let go. And almost immediately after the purchase, Thomas Jefferson wants to know what's in this territory. And of course, he sends out one of the most famous expeditions that's known, the Lewis and Clark expedition. Little lesser known to folks is the other expedition that was sent out right after that, because they had no idea if Lewis and Clark were even still alive at this point, much less if they'd found a route to the Pacific Ocean. And so he's going to send out Zebulon Pike with a expeditionary force, and they're going to explore more in the southern part of the Louisiana Purchase into what will become Colorado eventually. Hence why Colorado has Pike's Peak. He comes out here, they build a stockade, stay a winter, and then he gets captured by the Spanish because the Spanish don't want him out there. As far as they're concerned, that's their territory. And they arrest him, and eventually he gets released and sent back home. But after that, the United States and Spain start negotiations to finally figure out what's going to be this boundary. And so what finally comes about with the boundary is that basically, I think it's the line that divides California and Oregon. You draw that straight over until you get directly north of the headwaters of the Arkansas River. You come down to the Arkansas River. It follows the Arkansas River over into, I forget what meridian, but it's over in Oklahoma. So the panhandle of Oklahoma would have been Spain. Cuts that off, goes down by the panhandle of Texas until it hits the Red River. goes east until it hits the line between Texas and Louisiana and to the coast. And so at the end of that negotiation, the United States gets the port of New Orleans, which the Spanish weren't too happy about. If I remember right, we also get Florida. And so after that, the Spanish embargo the United States. They will not conduct any trade with the United States of America. And that's the way it is until 1821. And then Mexico gains its independence. And suddenly, now we can have commerce with Mexico. And there's a little town in northern Mexico that was a mission established, I forget what year, 15 something or 16 something, very old town, but it's kind of up there on the far north end of things, and getting supplies there from Mexico itself takes quite a ordeal. And so these people were needing supplies, and William Becknell decides to lead a trading expedition down to Santa Fe and see what they can bring back. They go down, and when they return, they bring back hundreds of thousands of dollars in silver in their wagons. Not talking about today's hundreds of thousands. We're talking about hundreds of thousands in their time. Multiple millions of dollars in today's money.
Mm-hmm.
And suddenly, it's a gold rush, or silver rush, to be more exact. And so after that, the Santa Fe Trail is going to become a major trade artery for a long time, up until the 1870s, and maybe, well, even after that, because really the railroad follows that same line there for a long time. And so as the trade becomes more lucrative, people start to do more and more in trade. It starts to become very busy. Or, as you know, the Oregon Trail, California Mormon trails, those are immigrant trails. The Santa Fe Trail, in reality, was more of a merchant's trail. It was a trucker's route. People weren't really going on that route to find homes. They were going there to find their fortune. And then there's a trail that connects Santa Fe to Mexico City. And so that really, it really does become a major trade artery for the United States. And so goods that would be shipped on the Santa Fe Trail, a lot of times they go down around the coast to New Orleans and up to St. Louis, or they could be sent overland from New York to St. Louis. But they go to St. Louis, and then they would be sent to the west. They go to Mexico, and then in turn, they would bring silver and other goods from Mexico that we couldn't get in the United States. And so, like I said, it'd be a very lucrative business. You could make a lot of money trading on the Santa Fe Trail. And as you start getting in the late 1820s, there's a couple trappers up here in the Rocky Mountains realizing beaver are getting trapped out. And there's more money in the trade. And there was a lot of trappers that realized this, but they didn't have a lot of them that had the financial backing. But in particular, Saron St. Vrain and Charles Bent decide that they want to try going in. So they go into a partnership. Of course, Saron St. Vrain, he's descended of French royalty. He's got the financial backing to do this operation. They're going to start trading late 1820s, early 1830s, but Charles' younger brother, William Bent, also decides to get in on the trade, but he's kind of going a different direction. He's going to trade with more of the natives. However, they're going to form a partnership called the Bent St. Vrain and Company. And in 1833, they're going to establish a trading post near the confluence of what we call the Purgatory River today, and the Arkansas River. And it's actually about 6-7 miles up from that confluence. They're going to establish a trading post there, and they're going to be on what becomes known as the wet route, or the mountain route of that Santa Fe Trail. So prior to that, Santa Fe Trail usually in the early days followed what became known as the Cimarron Cutoff. And this was more out towards Garrett's country. They get out to about where Cimarron, Kansas is now, not too far from Dodge City. And they would cross the Arkansas River and then kind of start off in a southwest direction, basically straight shot to Santa Fe. Problem with that route is that you were going through Comanche territory, and you were also going through dry territory. There wasn't a lot of stops for water along that route. Granted, there were stops, but not nearly as much as what the mountain route or the wet route, hence why it gets called the wet route. And so once Bent's Fort comes up, then you can start going through this other route, and you'll have water almost all the way. You don't have the Comanche. You don't have to worry about them attacking if they decide that they want what's in your wagons. The one problem, though, is that you have the Raton Pass that you have to go through. So it was a trade-off, but merchants still use both routes pretty heavily. Now, Bent St. Vrain, most of the trading they're going to be doing is supplies that they're bringing in themselves with their own wagons. But if a merchant train comes through on their way through and they need repairs, Bent St. Vrain Company will let them come in and pay them and their blacksmith whatever the cost is to repair their wagons. Mm-hmm. And so the summertime is when a lot of this is going on. So a lot of times in April, you're going to start seeing the wagons rolling out from Santa Fe or rolling out from Bent's Fort, heading back east, going to load up with goods. Then they're going to come back, get here sometime anywhere between middle to late August and early to middle September. Unload goods, load up, and do it again. Especially for Bent St. Vrain, and try to get at least 2 trips in before they come back and start the winter trading at Bent's Fort. And like I said, Bent's Fort primarily is trading with the natives, and it's their stopover point for supplies going to Santa Fe. And this trade route's going to go on like this for a lot of years. But as the 1840s come about, you're going to start to see more and more issues come up. The first one is the annexation of Texas. Well, it's not really the first one, but one of the issues is the annexation of Texas. So in 1845, the United States is going to annex Texas as the, oh goodness, I can't remember what state in the Union, 25th state in the Union. And Florida came in right after it, 26th. When they annex Texas, it starts an international incident because Mexico still recognizes Texas as an unruly, rebellious state. Even though Texas made Santa Anna sign they basically their Declaration of Independence saying they were free and independent, made him sign it in exchange for his life. Mexico didn't agree to that. Mexico says, no, your little piece is this little bitty chunk of ground down between so many rivers and just a small portion of what
north of the Nueces.
State. Yeah, basically from the Nueces Strip up to, I forgot what even river it was, but one little eastern corner of Texas. Texas says no, everything from the Rio Grande to the Arkansas River, that whole territory. So even up through chunks of Colorado, not quite up into Wyoming. And when they do that, Mexico is like, you just annexed part of our territory, but it's not enough to start war over. It's definitely heading that way. So there's a lot of argument, back and forth. The finally that's going to bring the pimple to a head, if you will, is Zachary Taylor, who had been stationed on the Nueces Strip to prevent an invasion of the United States, is ordered to move his troops to the Rio Grande across from Matamoros to prevent an invasion. Well, Mexico sees the Nueces Strip as that stretch along the Nueces River. That's the boundary. Anything south of that is Mexico. The United States sees anything north of the Rio Grande as the state of Texas. And so when they send Zachary Taylor down to the Rio Grande, Mexico says, you have invaded Mexico. They attack Taylor. And then the United States says, you have invaded the United States and attacked soldiers on U.S. soil. You've invaded us. The Mexican-American War is going to start. And that's really going to have a lot of effects on the trade. So that blows up. General Stephen Watts Kearny is going to march down the Santa Fe Trail in the summer of 1846. He's got 2 tasks. His first one is to go over and take over Santa Fe because the United States wants to secure that section so that when they come to a treaty, they can just say, we have already annexed this. This is ours now. Stephen Watts Kearny will march. He'll arrive in June at Bent's Fort. They'll lay over there waiting for supplies to come up, negotiate the use of Bent's Fort to store supplies and keep their sick and wounded there because As you're going through the middle of the United States in the 1840s, we don't think of it today. Malaria is a thing you think of in jungle countries. Well, there was basically the similar thing to malaria here in the plains. So there was a lot of soldiers that got sick from that. Lieutenant James A. Bear come down with it, and it laid him up for a long time. And A. Bear, while he was there at Bent's Fort, while he's recovering, he takes measurements of the fort, and that's why we got the reconstruction there now. But then Kearny, once he gets organized, he's going to march off, and now he's, of course, at this point, he's General Stephen Watts Kearny. Before that, he was Colonel. Marches into Santa Fe and takes over New Mexico, what they considered the state of New Mexico, without firing a shot. Basically, there's some evidence, but nothing solid to prove that the governor of New Mexico was bought off. Because when Kearny starts marching down there, the army that he had raised, he just says, y'all have fun. He takes off and leaves, and that little force dissolves. And Kearny comes in and says, all right, this is now the United States. You're citizens of the United States. You're subject to the same protections. We're going to protect you from the natives. Mexico hasn't done this. And so promises them all these good things, and the people are like, okay, it's got to be better than what we had, because Santa Fe was kind of out there in the middle of nowhere. It doesn't get a lot of protection. It's kind of like your little small towns in rural America today that are way out in the middle of nowhere. You call for help, it might be a long time before it gets there. And so the war with Mexico, of course, is going to affect commerce. But it's still going on. There's a guy that comes along with Kearny. The name is Samuel Magoffin. And Samuel Magoffin brings his wife, who's pregnant, along with him to a war zone. Well, it just so happens that Samuel Magoffin's also going to meet with a delegation from the Mexican state of New Mexico, and probably was involved in the bribe that led to Armijo just taking off. Why else would you bring your wife to a war zone unless you knew that there wasn't going to be any fighting?
Yep.
So commerce is going to continue, even though it was hampered a bit by Mexican-American War. Kearny will head for California at that point and get soundly whooped. Although they consider it a U.S. victory, he has one of the biggest battles and nearly loses it out in California. And he'll leave a detachment of soldiers back in Santa Fe. But well, the soldiers in Santa Fe are not of a number to really do any good when it comes to protection. And I believe that the Navajo and the Apache start raiding again around Santa Fe. And the people in New Mexico realize, okay, these guys are just as bad as the guys that they said they were replacing. We're going to do better than. And you have a priest that also is adding fuel to the fire. And Charles Bent of the Bent St. Vrain Company was appointed illegally by Stephen Watts Kearny as a civilian governor of New Mexico Territory. Well, in January of 1847, once again, the pimple comes to a head, and it bursts, and you have what's known as the Taos Revolt. And at the end of that, Charles Bent will be killed in front of his family. His family does escape and make it back to Bent's Fort. Several others are killed. And then William Bent basically says, we've had enough. And he organizes a group of mountain men. They head down to Taos. They meet up with the group of soldiers that Kearny had left behind, Doniphan's men. And they capture these rebels, if you will, in a little church in Taos, New Mexico. And they pretty much just lay into them, and those that surrender wind up getting hung. A little event that's known as the Taos Revolt. And so, with the death of Charles Bent, he was the glue that held William Bent and Saron St. Vrain together. They split. Bent St. Vrain Company dissolves. William Bent takes over possession of Bent's Fort, and within a few years, it falls apart, and William Bent will eventually abandon it. Saron St. Vrain continues his trade along the Santa Fe Trail. So in reality, even though Bent's Fort disappears, the trade along the trail continues, but it's not going to be as lucrative because now you're trading with a city within your own country. But commerce does continue. William Bent will continue sending goods down to Santa Fe in 1854, I believe it was. Uncle Dick Wooten stated that he ran into William Bent a few miles out of Santa Fe with a caravan of wagons and challenged Bent to a race, and Wooten beat William Bent getting there. Now, Wooten is one of those that sometimes he tells a tall tale, so I don't know if it happened exactly like that, but it shows that William Bent was still conducting trade. And he did conduct trade with the natives. He did build a new fort, but by that point, the trade with the natives in this part of the country was starting to die. It really was starting to die off because Colorado is starting to go the way of California. Not talking modern times, back then. That you're going to start seeing people moving into the territory, and then suddenly they discover this thing called gold in 1859, and that's going to be a topic for another day. But it's starting to really get settled. It's starting to get populated. More and more people are coming in, and so the native trade there was really starting to die out. But the Santa Fe Trail, like the Oregon Trail, the California Trail, was a vital line. It was one of the main arteries. And so in 1849, just before William Bent abandons the fort, the military realizes it needs to establish military posts out here to, one, protect Indian tax, and two, kind of solidify the hold over this new territory they just gained. So up on the Oregon Trail, they'll establish Fort Kearny, named after Stephen Watts Kearny, who died in California. They will establish Fort Laramie with the purchase of the American Fur Company's Fort John. And they will establish Fort Hall over in what will become Idaho. And down along the Santa Fe Trail, they kind of have the same idea. And so they approach William Bent about purchasing his trading post, and they offer him $15,000. Now, when they bought Fort John from the American Fur Company, they offered them $4,000, and the American Fur Company jumped at it because up there, the competition with the trade was so strong that it wasn't feasible for them to keep it open anymore. By the time that they paid out, bought goods, paid to keep the building up, and then paid with competition, they weren't really making a lot of money up there. And so the Army offers Bent $15,000. It's a huge amount of money. And William Bent says, that price is too low. I won't sell it for that much. And this building is very similar to what Fort John was in size. It's an adobe structure. And at this point, William Bent is having a hard time keeping the walls up. But the final nail in the coffin for him is the Army. Of course, they offer to buy it, and then they start saying that, well, you don't have permission to have built this structure. You only have a trade license. We can take it from you and not pay you a dime. But that final nail in the coffin is that in 1849, the Santa Fe Trail is starting to become an immigrant route. And so in 1849, everybody's heading for California. You can go down the Oregon-California Trail, get to California from the north, or you can take the Santa Fe Trail, go to Santa Fe on the Santa Fe Trail, then you pick up, I forget what the trail's called, but there's another trail that goes across New Mexico, Arizona, and there over into California on the southern route. And so when people start traveling that, you have more and more folks coming through. It only makes sense that when the cholera epidemic hits the U.S. in 1849, that it's going to start coming through that southern route. And that's exactly what happens. And so the Southern Cheyenne come to Bent's Fort sometime in August of 1849. And they come to talk with William Bent because the cholera has hit the Northern Cheyenne up on the Platte. It's hit them hard. It hit all the tribes hard. And so they come to William Bent saying, well, what do we do? How do we fight this? Because William Bent basically served as that link between their world and the Anglo world back east. And while they're waiting for him, one of the chiefs became sick and died. And within a short time, half of the tribe, some 3,000 people, died from the cholera. And when William Bent arrived, he may have figured that the fort is where they got it at because that's where they were waiting for him. And so in 1849, August 19th, I believe it was, he abandons the fort. Now, his caravan that was coming up, one of his caravans that were coming up a few days out, said they could hear a large explosion and a column of smoke coming from where the fort should be. And when they got there, the western wall was decimated. The rear bastion was destroyed. The rear wall was destroyed. and the western wall was heavily burned. Now it's adobe structures. Yeah, the walls didn't burn, but the roof had burnt and caved in. And the belief is that William Bent, fearful that the army was going to take over, fearful that cholera would continue to spread, set fire to the fort, fire to the powder magazine, and blew it up. Now, you would think if he was just going to leave, that he would have took gunpowder with him, because gunpowder back then is pretty valuable stuff. And it's kind of expensive. And when they do the archaeology there, they find out that the powder magazine had the heaviest scorching. And so that tells you that the powder magazine went. And he may have just done that to keep the army from using it. Whatever reason, he does partially destroy it and he leaves. And there's also speculation that the natives did it. But in reality,
do you think the army would have confiscated it from him?
Probably, because that's what they did with his new fort in 1859.
Yeah.
Or
so
58.
if he'd have kept the powder, they'd probably just took it from him.
Yep. And so Bent's Fort's part of the Santa Fe Trail history is going to end in August 1849. But like I said, Santa Fe Trail keeps going on. So the military doesn't establish a fort yet around Bent's Fort. They'll establish Fort Union down in New Mexico territory, and that'll be a big operation. That is the big supply hub, really, for military posts out here in this part of the West. Now, as the years go on, the relations with the Native Americans just continue to deteriorate. You have the Grattan fight in 1854 up in Wyoming territory. In Nebraska territory in 1855, you have the Battle of Ash Hollow, which is actually a massacre where General William S. Harney, who had basically taken over control of the Dragoons after Stephen Watts Kearny had passed, he's going to attack that village in retaliation for the Grattan fight. And the relations just continue to go on down from there. But William Bent, with his new trading post in 1854 thereabouts, he tries to keep good relations going on. But like I said, the native trade down here in this part of the country was pretty well done at that point. But the military starts to build more and more forts. And as you get into the 1860s, they're going to continue to build forts. So one of the ones they're going to build is William Bent's second trading post. He establishes, like I said, a new trading post about 40 miles downriver from where the old one's at. Builds it out of stone this time because he realizes adobe takes a lot of money to keep up. So he builds a stone building. And it's about half the size. In a quarter, you could probably fit it in the plaza of Bent's Fort. He establishes that little trading post there, and he operates it for a few years. And then the military decides they're going to establish their military fort there. And so he signs a contract with them. It says they can lease his fort for use of their new military establishment. So they basically put the quartermaster shop in his old fort. They put up a barricade wall. I forget what you call the name, the proper military term. But it has two corners. They have cannons, basically protect the quartermaster shop. And after a couple of years, William Bent goes to the army and says, hey, you still haven't paid me the rent for this building. And they said, well, you didn't have permission to build this building here. It's now government property. And so they take over his second fort. So they would have took over the first one if he hadn't have done something or hadn't have blown it up. So they take over the operation. They're going to establish, at first it's Camp Fauntleroy. Then it becomes Fort Wise, named after the lieutenant governor of the state of Virginia. And then this little thing called the Civil War breaks out, and Wise becomes an officer in the Confederate Army. And them dadgum Yankees decide, well, we don't want our forts named after Confederates. And so it's changed to Fort Lyon. And Fort Lyon is named after the first Union officer killed in the American Civil War. And so Fort Lyon will operate there where Bent's Fort, right there on the Santa Fe Trail, Bent's new fort was at, up until 1868, and it gets flooded out. So they tear it down, move about halfway between Bent's old fort and Bent's new fort, and they establish Fort Lyon number 2. And that's where it currently is today. It's a state rehabilitation center. Basically, folks with drug and alcohol problems go there. For a while, it was a state prison hospital. Those with life sentences that were about to die went there. And it was also a state mental asylum. So it's had a long history. But Santa Fe Trail commerce is going to continue to go on. You still have routes coming through. You have merchants coming through, but nowhere near as lucrative as it was in those early days. But it's still, like I said, it's one of those arteries. And so the military wants to keep it up because that's how the military is sending goods down to Fort Union, which is their major supply hub. And so they established forts in Kansas as well. Now, I forget what years they were all established. There's so many of them. I can't keep track, but you're going to wind up with Fort Dodge. You're going to wind up with Fort Larned. You have Fort Scott, which Fort Scott was established fairly early on. I think that was 1830 something. I cannot remember off the top of my head. Somebody jump in the chat if you know what year. And so they're going to be established basically. What's that?
Riley.
Riley's further. No, Riley is on the Santa Fe Trail. That's right, because it's up there by Great Bend.
Up there and comes down. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're not familiar with the Santa Fe Trail, once it leaves Westport, it's overland from Kansas until you hit what's known as the Great Bend of the Arkansas River. And if Garrett can throw the background up there, maybe move our little cameras off to the side.
Yeah. Just a minute here. I don't know if I can do that. Hang on.
Because where he needs to be at is about where the brim of his hat and the crown of his hat come together.
Yeah. Give me just a second. I'm going to draw up another one.
Okay.
Because that's a background. You still there?
Yeah, we're still here.
All right. I will have it in just a second. So, I know that Fort Larned was there before the Civil War, so.
Yeah, it was like it was about the same time as Fort Lyon. I remember it was 1857. They closed it down in 75.
Let's see. This appears to be a good one here.
Well, you still have the background picture saved on your desktop?
Actually, I don't, only on the StreamYard, but I have it right here, so don't worry. I just got to bring it up as a brand and a banner.
Gives me a little break because my voice is starting to say you need to stop talking for a few minutes.
All right. There we go. I'm getting better at doing this on the fly.
There we go. All right, yeah, so once you get to that part about the middle of Kansas there where you see that big kind of curve in the middle of the trail, that's about where Great Bend, Kansas is at. And that's where the Great Bend of the Arkansas, because the Arkansas River travels east, and all of a sudden it takes a southeasterly route and starts heading for Arkansas. And that's where the trail is going to pick up. The Arkansas River is in that bend. And merchants that were on their way, wagon trains that were on their way through would stop just before that at a place called Council Grove. And at Council Grove, they'd stop and they'd cut down hardwood trees, hickory, oak, ash, and take those logs and lash them up under the wagons, because that's the last place you can really get decent hardwood for repairing wagons with. And they'd lash them up underneath the wagons and then continue on their way, because if you break a tongue, well, you need a good piece of ash. If you break an axle, you're going to need some hardwood. If you break your wheel, you better hope that you're near a blacksmith shop, because wheels are a little more intricate to repair. And a lot of wagons didn't carry spare wheels because you've got two different sizes on your wheels. Your front wheels are way smaller than the back wheels. Mm-hmm. And the wheels on these merchant wagons are not small. They are big. Now, when I worked at Bent's Fort, the guys that were there before me had done a lot of research on those wagons that they used, and we do have Dearborns listed. You hear about Studebakers. There's another one in there. Conestogas were commonly referenced, but Conestoga really talks about a style, not really specifically a maker. And then the ones that you don't see really mentioned are on the trail is Murphy wagons, but Murphy wagons were made right there in St. Louis. And Murphy wagons were very similar to Conestogas in shape and style. The thing is, they are huge wagons.
Yeah, that's clear.
Yeah, so it's a little broader, but yeah, you can see there's that little kink right above the T in Santa Fe Trail. So that's the Great Bend. So no real specific reference to Murphy wagons, but there's more likely they were out there. So they're big freight wagons that are coming through. When you got those big wheels, they're fairly difficult to repair on the trail, but they did do it. It could be done, but it was not something that was easily done. So yeah, they cut those.
That trail going through Arizona to California, that was the Gila Trail?
Yeah, the Gila Trail. There's another trail I don't see on there that go down. It's called the El Camino Real. Basically,
the Trail. Or the Southern Trail, sorry.
Yeah, the El Camino Real basically go down that little trail coming out of Santa Fe there. It would continue on down to Mexico City. But yeah, the Gila Trail, that would go over to California. So that was the other route you could take to get to the California gold fields. And then, yeah, there was a trail if you wanted to go through Mormon territory, you could go on that Mormon trail. Most of them came in from the California Trail or the Santa Fe, the Gila Trail. So, as I said, you start getting the 1860s, there's still a bit going on. But military is establishing posts out there. And of course, the Native American conflicts that are going to happen, the Indian wars that take place out there, those posts are going to serve essential roles for the military out there along that trail route, because that trail is a pretty heavily traveled route. It would make sense to have, those military forts close to where they could get supplies at. Now, as you get into the 1870s, suddenly there's a new change coming along that's going to really break down that old Santa Fe Trail merchant routes. And that's the coming of the railroad. So, as you have in 1869, you have the Transcontinental Railroad, which basically follows the California-Oregon Mormon Trail, or the Oregon Trail for a good portion of it, and the California Trail in some respects. It's going to come together out there at Promontory Point, Utah, and then other railroads start to come in after that. And in 1875, the rail lane is going to get to what's now the state of Colorado. And the Santa Fe Railroad is going to come right on through, and by 1879, it's going to be all the way down to Santa Fe. And really, that's what's going to stop the merchant wagons coming through, the travel on the trail, because now, instead of rolling around in a wagon, now you can just jump on a train, and you're there in a quarter or a minute fraction of the time that it would take you going by wagon to get your supplies. And that's kind of the same for the Oregon Trail, is coming through Fort Laramie, because once that rail line gets to Cheyenne, well, and as soon as it gets completed, suddenly there's not the need for immigrants to travel by wagon. They can travel by train. And by 1883, they wouldn't be taking wagons to California and Oregon. Had to get that little dig in there.
I know. And by the 1890s, they definitely wouldn't be riding natives in wagons back up to Idaho either, or Montana.
Right. But anyway, that is kind of a very brief overview of the Santa Fe Trail. And I could get a lot more in-depth into it. There's a lot of things I didn't talk about. But
do you know when the last wagon rolled through? It seemed like that was a deal we discussed one time.
We discussed it. I don't remember off the top of my head.
It was like in the mid 1880s when the last freight.
Yeah. Yeah, it would have been just after, not too long after the rail line got completed. Because if I remember right, it was 1879 is once it got to Santa Fe, because it was 70. Yeah, it was 79 that they closed the stagecoach station at Bent's Old Fort. So Bent's Old Fort, after Bent abandoned it a few years later. A stagecoach company came in, and they operated for just about the same amount of time that Bennett operated, about 20 years. They came in, well, several stagecoach companies. They came in and used it as a station. The first guy that opened it went to William Bent and said, "Hey, can we use your old fort for stagecoach station?" He says, "I ain't using it. Go ahead." So Barlow, Sanderson, I think Butterfield at one point was operating out of there. Lots of different stagecoach companies. And they would basically run until the railroad put the stage line out of business. So I think it was 1850 something to 1870 something. Wasn't quite 20 years.
That is what it just amazes and astounds me about the Santa Fe Trail, because like the Oregon Trail lasts from like 40 something to 1865, and the train's there.
Yeah, 69, yeah.
But the Santa Fe Trail lasted for 70 years almost.
Yeah, it ran for a long time.
That's insane to me. That's a lot of history.
And really, it was the major artery for a long time. Because, a lot of goods were not shipped over the Oregon. It wasn't a merchant route, because by the time you send a merchant wagon train from St. Louis to California or to Oregon, you could put that stuff on a ship in New York, sail it around South America and back up and be there, if not a little quicker than what the wagons would do, and cheaper. You can send 1 or 2 boats. It would take 20, 30, 40 wagons to haul. And so that's why that trail is more of an immigrant trail. People are not really traveling to make money. They're traveling to build new homes. Whereas Santa Fe Trail, if you've noticed, is kind of landlocked in the middle of things right there. It's kind of hard to get a boat to it.
Yeah.
I mean, you can try to take one with the Rio Grande, but you're not going to get very far. And so that's the reason why it was such a vital merchant route, is because, that was a major supply line.
That's interesting. You ready to go to some comments?
Let's go to some comments. I'm going to go start digging out books.
Okay. Well, some of these are questions, so
go ahead.
Let's see. We'll start up here. The last one I read was from Hardy. Harley Ironhead said, "Good evening, all." Talking about history and reenactments shutting down, Hardy said one of the biggest local reenactments was canceled this year. I don't reenact it anymore, but I was sad to hear it. Doug Duke said very few people of any kind in history, very few young people, of any kind of history. The Saboteur 45 said, "I'm a youngster." Louisiana Gray.
Younger than I am.
Louisiana Gray said, "I've been waiting for some Santa Fe Trail too." Kodak Tackman said, "It's pretty terrible when you see a young teenager walk into a souvenir shop at a Civil War reenactment and ask what a candle is."
Oh, geez. Yeah, that is bad.
Soylent Green says, "Here we go," rubs hands. Doug Dukes asked, "Didn't Dick Wooten have control of Raton Pass?"
Yes, he did have a toll road on the Raton Pass for a number of years. Yes, he did. I don't remember how many years, but it was quite a few years he was up there.
Jeremy P. said, "Bent St. Vrain and the..." You might have to read that one.
Okay, I'll be right back in a second.
He said, "We're huge in the trade routes." S. Lee said, "Thank you, sirs, for this amazing information." Oregon Outback said, "Some things never change." Billy Allen said, "Hello in the camp." Oregon Outback said, "Was that southern route to California known as the I-40 Trail?"
That's pretty close to
it. Desert Boy says, "Evening, folks. Appreciate the history." Doug Duke said, Where in New Mexico is Fort Union?"
Just outside of Watrous.
Oregon Outback said, "Lyon was the first general killed in the Civil War, Wilson Creek in southwest Missouri, August 61. called the Bull Run of the West. Yeah, we played them rough that day.
Yeah, if I remember it. Yeah, it was pretty early
song,
on there.
to quote a certain song Ethan liked so much about the Brunswick rifle, we treated them rough that day. Tim O'Neill says Fort Hays west of Fort Riley was early 1850s. Reed Desert Boy asked, "Don't you need wheelwrights to make wagon wheels?"
Back east, yes, they would have specialist wheelwrights. Out west, any blacksmith had better be able to do it.
Yeah, Desert Boy asked, "Were those Murphy's wagons pulled by oxen, not horses, since they were bigger?"
Yes, in fact, that was one of the things that I was going to touch on. Charles Bent, okay, Search Bent St. Vrain Company, is the one that basically really pioneered the use of oxen over horses for traveling on the trail, because oxen are cheaper. They last longer than horses do. You don't have to pack grain for them. And so, and the natives were less likely to steal them. And so, yeah, they used mostly oxen on that travel route along the Santa Fe Trail there.
Mm-hmm. Jeremy P. comment and said, Fort Washita is right on the Fort Smith Santa Fe Trail in Oklahoma. It is a neat place to see.
That one's one I have not read up much on.
Yeah. Desert Rat said Transcontinental Railroad completed in 69. And Stephen M. Mann said the original Route 66, LOL.
Yeah.
AR American said, have a good night, folks. Got to get up early for work. Good live, Duke and Garrett. Thank you. S. Lee said 6 months of summer, 6 months of winter.
Pretty much.
And that's where they're at on the comments.
All right. Well, I'm going to get into some books here.
I'll be right back. You want me? You still want this map up here, or you want me to take it down?
Go ahead and throw our pictures back up.
Okay.
All righty. So the first one, and probably one of the most important records on the Santa Fe Trail, is the Diary of Susan Shelby McGoffin. It's called Down the Santa Fe Trail into Mexico. And so Susan McGoffin, she's that lady that her husband, Samuel McGoffin, brought her out during the Mexican-American War down to Santa Fe there. And so she kept a diary of it. She was pregnant when they came out. She lost her baby at Bent's Fort. She would die shortly thereafter. But, yeah, they go down the Santa Fe Trail, and then on their return, they come back up, I remember right, by boat. Part of it. So this is a great source, but unfortunately it's only limited to about 1 year. But yeah, great for that particular time period. Another good one is Lieutenant James A. Bear Expedition to the Southwest. A. Bear came through Bent's Fort twice. First time in 1845, exploring, trying to find the headwaters of the Canadian. This kind of gives you an idea. We're getting ready to annex Texas and all that, because they're sending a military guy out to explore Mexican territory a year before, or before we even annex Texas. So he's got a good record. This is just the 1845, so it's not a very big record, but it's a good record nonetheless. Let me see here. Another great one. This also takes place. This is going to kind of pick up what's going on at Bent's Fort right after Susan McGoffin leaves. Louis Gerard, however you want to say it, shows up in the fall of 1846 at Bent's Fort. Basically, came out west to have fun, because Strawn St. Vrain would gather up folks back east, say, hey, you want to come out and have fun out at Bent's Fort? And they'd bring him out for a year. So he was out here for about a year. He got to see the Taos Revolt. So he's there from 46 to 47. And then, of course, you got David Lavender's. Mine's an old copy, but David Lavender's Bent's Fort. It's a pretty good, tells you a good detail of what happened at Bent's Fort, but it is a dry read, I will tell you that. Kind of just on the trail in general. Commerce of the Prairies by Josiah Gregg. This is a great book. Gregg made two 2 trips down the trail. If I remember right, the first one, I don't remember when the first one was. I know one of them was in 1839. But yeah, in 1839, I just noticed something. This was published in Torrington, Wyoming. Ha! And I bought it at Bent's Fort long before I went to Torrington.
Didn't know Torrington had a publishing house.
Well, apparently the Narrative Press is published in Torrington, and I did not know that.
That's interesting.
4392 U.S. Highway 2685, Torrington, Wyoming.
Saboteur
I think I know where that's at. I don't think they're there anymore.
He said, you guys want to have fun in the West? Proceeds to see a bloody revolt. Fun indeed.
Oh, geez.
Sounds like that Taos Rebellion could be an episode all of its own.
You know, I've got a book on my wish list on Amazon for it. I just haven't bought it yet. But it's on there. It will be a topic someday. I've got so many books. We could cover topics, and we could do it once every 2 weeks for the next 10 years, and I wouldn't get through half my books. So
I got a question. So see if I can get the Bent straight.
Yep.
So you got Charles Bent, the governor.
Yep.
First fort. Did he start the first fort?
He was part of it, but he was more in the Santa Fe section with Sir Ron St. Vrain. Okay. William Bent was the one that ran the fort.
His son, or is it his nephew?
His brother.
His brother. Okay, so his brother William Bent is running the fort till it falls out, and William Bent's 2 sons are the infamous Bents.
You hit the head on the nail with that one. And to alleviate any confusion, William Bent named all of his sons after his brothers.
Okay, that's just Charles is every time I've tried to look up Charles Bent, I get old Charles Bent, not young.
You don't get Charlie Bent. There's not a lot known about Charlie Bent because Charlie Bent kind of was more of a little, let's say he was a little wild.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll get into that one here in a second. I'll get into them. We'll do that as our little extras. Let me finish up what I got on these books here. So we've got Adventures into the Santa Fe Trade, 1844 to 1847. This one is James Webb. He talks about a lot of good stuff when it comes to what the merchants were doing, and stuff they had to deal with when they got to New Mexico. That's a great read. This one is a great read because it's historical fiction. George Ruxton wrote this. It's all fiction, all of it. However, he was writing it as he was going through the West. So when he talks about riding up on Bent's Fort and seeing the flag, it's exactly what he saw. And he wrote it into his fiction book. The names that he uses in here, nobody really knows who they are. And there's been some historians that have a pretty good idea of who he was with. But he probably, what he did is he took several of the characters he's riding around with and condensed them down into one of the main guys in here. Because he was probably out with Walker and a few of those other guys that were known to run around out here. And Walker's book, I gotta find that one because that one definitely is one that we need to talk about someday. But yeah, Life in the Far of the West, it's a great one. The one character he does keep the name in there is Old Bill Williams, because Old Bill Williams, you just can't make him up. Taos Trappers is another great book, dealing with kind of the fur trade section of what's going on down in there. And it goes clear back into when the Spanish started in the 1500s and all the way up until after the war with Mexico. This is the one that's kind of on another small specific one that we'll have to do for another day, but basically the Warfield and Snively expeditions. Texas tried to disrupt trade with Mexico by coming up and attacking Mexican merchants on the Santa Fe Trail in United States territory, and raised a lot of heck for Bent St. Vrain and Company. But this is a great little book on that expedition. And then one of the best sources, Life of George Bent, and that's going to cover Bent's Fort, some of the Santa Fe Trail stuff, and this goes into the Indian Wars as well, because let me take care of this one, then we'll get into that. But if you can find this one online, This is a great one. This is actually the symposium that took place at Bent's Fort. I got to be a part of it. My name's in the back of it, in fact.
What's it called, actually?
It is called Proceedings of the 2015 Fur Trade Symposium, Bent's Fort and the Southern Fur Trade, September 23rd through 26th, 2015. So this is all the presentations that were condensed down into one book, and there's some great stuff on here that's specific to Bent's Fort, and it's got some of the other stuff that was going on there. I don't know if my picture got in here. I don't think it did. I think they used some older pictures from down around there, but this is a great little thing. It's got different stuff from different presenters. Let's see. Yeah, my name is in here.
Do they not do they call you Duke or use your other name?
They use my given name.
Okay, gotcha. So if you want to know Duke's given name, you got to go buy that book.
And then, yeah, so this one here, Life of George Bent, like I said, great history on there, and gets into the Plains Indian Wars, and it explains the Bent brother, or the Brent children, that get confused sometimes with Bent brothers. So William Bent, when he came out, started that trading post, was a bachelor. To solidify these trade hold with the Native Americans, he married Owl Woman, a Southern Cheyenne woman, in 1835. And one of the traditions then is you marry the oldest sister, you get all the younger sisters too. So he actually had 3 wives. He had Owl Woman, Yellow Woman, and Island. And so Owl Woman, he marries 1835, and he has several children with her. And they say that when they marry in, that the first wife, the one you marry, is a primary wife. The other ones are just accessory wives. But one of those brothers is born kind of in the middle of the others, and most of the children are from Owl Woman. So that tells you that they were all sharing a bed at one point. So Bent has multiple children. I can't remember how many off the top of my head, but he names all of his children after his brothers. Robert Bent. His brother Robert had come out, and he was a business partner in the Bent State Grain Company, a smaller partner, but a business partner. There's 2 conflicting stories of how he died. There's the published version. It says that he was killed by the Comanches. They scalped him and dropped his dead body off in front of the fort to scare William Bent into doing what they wanted, and probably led to William Bent closing down his trading post down on the Canadian that was known as Fort Adobe, which becomes later known as Adobe Walls. The unpublished account that was in a letter written by one of those kids that Saron St. Vrain would bring out states that Robert was in a horse race, got off of the horse, and suddenly he was paralyzed. He took 2 steps from the horse and he fell to the ground. He couldn't walk, and they couldn't figure out what it was, and so they sent him back east, and by the time he got there, he died. What we do know is he's buried back east. He's buried back in St. Louis. And then Bent had another son named George, named after his brother George, and George was also one of those who was a business partner. George Bent dies in 1847, supposedly of either cholera or not cholera, probably malaria. Became very ill and died there inside the walls of the fort, and he was sent back east and buried. And then he had a boy named Charles, named after Charles Bent. And the son, Charles, is the one that joins the Dog Soldiers. Well, all the Bent sons, Robert, George, and Charlie, join the Dog Soldiers. And Charlie will meet his fate in Kansas. I think it's 1867 or 68. He's wounded and dies fighting soldiers out there in Kansas somewhere. And then William Bent also had another son, if I remember right, his name's John, and he had a daughter named Julia. He had a daughter named Julia. He had a brother named John. John never came out to the fort. He stayed back east. And so the Bent children would all be together with their family in Black Kettle's village on November 29th, 1864, when Chivington attacked and wiped out a good portion of that village. It was after that that George and Charlie and Robert decided to join the dog soldiers, and Charlie, I guess, participated in some really bad mutilations, and after that, William Bent disowned him. And Charlie basically told him, if I ever see you again, I don't care if you're my father, I will kill you. You're a white man. But they all took part in the 1865 war that mostly took part up in Wyoming, up in there. But yeah, all of his sons would participate in the Indian Wars. And so if you've seen the movie Centennial, I think most people watching this have seen Centennial. The Pasquinel brothers are based very much off of Charlie and George Bent. Because Charlie was kind of like the older Pasquinel brother. He was very, very much a fighter. And part of the reason why those two brothers, Robert Bent was not at the village per se, at Sand Creek. George and Charlie were. George and Charlie had joined the Confederate Army, had been captured, and were paroled back. And William Bent was afraid, being there was a lot of pro-Union people out here, that they would be hung as traitors, and so he sent them out to the village to be safe with the family. The daughter was there too. And Robert was at his father's ranch near where the town of Los Animas is today, and that's where William Bent is buried at, is in Los Animas. But Chivington took Robert and forced Robert basically at gunpoint to lead them to the village. And so Robert basically stood up on the top of the hill and could do nothing as he watched his family murdered before his eyes. Some of his family members murdered before his eyes. The Bent children will all survive. Another one that was tied to that family was John Smith's son. I think his name was Jack Smith. And John Smith was a trader that had joined William Bent and been with William Bent for most of the time he was trading out here in the West. John Smith served as the interpreter for the Southern Cheyenne at the 1851 Fort Laramie Treaty. And after the fight, they had the Bent children in a teepee. They had John Smith's son in the teepee. And soldiers, the story says, cut a hole in the side of the teepee, pulled Smith out, and just shot him right outside the teepee. And so he was murdered up there after the battle. He might have been one of the last that were killed. But the Bents played a part in the history of the Cheyenne, pretty much from the day their father opened that trading post. Well, even before that, because he had made friends with him when he had his picket stockade, his wooden stockade up closer to Pueblo, Colorado. They were part of that. Even to this day, there's still Bent family members that are still down in Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm. That is a very interesting family history right there. It's like when you like the older generation, it's like they saw a lot. But the younger generation, it's like it just got wilder and wilder and wilder till the end.
And, Charlie Bent resented his father because, from what George Bent says, they felt their father had brought a lot of this on because he was one of those first whites that come out and kind of pioneered everything. But, William Bent got to come out and he made peace. He made friendships. He made a family with the Southern Cheyenne, and he would see that all destroyed, pretty much destroyed before his death in 1869. He finally died of pneumonia in 1869.
I see. I got a few more comments over here if you're ready.
Yeah, go for it.
Desert Rat 45 said, my third grandfather had a team of oxen that the fam came west in 1853. Desert Boy said, any recommended books on the Western Civil War in New Mexico and Arizona and the routes for mining wealth were key to the routes for mining wealth were key to Union and Confederacy. Nevada was battle-born without meeting statehood rules.
Right.
He's wanting to know if you know of any good books on Civil War on
There
Western.
is a few of them out there. I've got them on my reading list. I don't have them on me, but there's I think it's called
Red.
well, there's War in the Borderlands.
Yeah.
And I think there's Gettysburg of the West, and that's about the Glorietta fight, which John Shivington, if he would have finished out the war without attacking Black Kettle, would have been a war hero because he stopped the Confederate invasion of the Colorado Territory and probably, stopped gold going to the Confederacy. But then he has to go and decides he wants to wipe out a village of people for political gain. And so, yeah, there's that one. There's several others out there. Can't think of them off the top of my head. And if I try to look at them on the phone right now, I'll lose the chat. But, yeah, look, War of the Borderlands is one of them that talks about
anything to do with Rip Ford will cover a little bit more of the Eastern stuff, but still.
Yeah. But yeah, that's the only ones that, like I said, they're on my list. I just haven't had them because I've been up in Wyoming and studying up on that. So everything I've been buying book wise has been related to the Northern Plains. So my Southern Plains books, I don't have much on, but the next one I'm probably going to buy is on Hancock's War, which takes place out in Garrett's country. Which that and I'll probably order here because we've got there's an event at Fort Larned in Kansas I'm going to go to in May, which that's going to be a fun one.
Yeah. Stephen M. Mann wants to know if your name is Poindexter D. Frazier.
Poindexter D. Frazier.
Oregon Outback guesses it's Francisco Ferdinand Frazier.
No, I'm not royalty.
Louisiana Gray said, nice to see the interaction with Centennial movie. And Desert.
Yeah, and actually.
Thank you, sir.
All those guys in that fur trade section of Centennial are based off of a lot of those guys I was just talking about. Because you see, Alexander McKeague, what the heck is that kid's name? The Zent kid. Pasquinel, they're all based off of, people that were out there on Santa Fe Trail at Bent's Fort. Is that it on the comments?
Yeah, Saboteur said, so it's still not Roy.
Yeah.
That's kind of a deep cut there.
Oh, yeah, no, there's kind of a running joke there.
I must not know it.
Yeah, he came up there and we were sitting there talking. We were sitting there talking one night at one event. I don't remember which one it was, but he's like, "Yeah," he says, "I thought your name was Roy."
I thought he was referring to Quigley Down Under.
No. No, I ain't gonna go there. But yeah, so anyways, that's basically the brief overview of the Santa Fe Trail. Like I said, there's lots more you can get into in depth too, because Bent's Fort, Santa Fe Trail, it's one of those things that out here in the West, everything ties into everything. William Bent's tied to Fort Laramie in ways. And then there's a lot of characters that we're going to go on. I know we talked about, what's his name? Tom Tobin. We're going to do that one of these days. Tom Tobin worked for Bent's Fort. One of the books that I couldn't find to get here on the table is Uncle Dick Wooten's book. Uncle Dick Wooten worked for William Bent for quite a few years there at the old fort. And yeah, he did have a toll road for a number of years. I don't remember how long, but he had toll road on the Raton Pass for a long time. Started one of the first farms in Colorado.
Wow, Bill freighted through there a lot in his younger years.
Yep. Buffalo Bill Cody came through. Comanche Jack Stillwell was a teamster before he became a scout for Custer out here on the Santa Fe Trail. So yeah, there's a lot of guys that had ties to that one way or another.
So was Jedediah Smith officially on the Santa Fe Trail when he died? Okay.
Yeah, that was one of the things I was going to get into, and I forgot about it. So yeah, Jedediah Smith, like many other mountain men, decided, well, Santa Fe trade's open. Let's get into that, make some money. And this was in 1830. Oh boy, I done forgot what year. But anyway, yeah, first time on the Santa Fe Trail in the early 1830s. There, he's guiding a merchant wagon train through and tells them, I'm going to go off and see if I can find water because they're on the Cimarron cutoff. And he rides out and never comes back. And his party thought, well, maybe he rode on to Santa Fe because they weren't too terribly far. And so they arrive in Santa Fe, no Jedediah Smith. And they come across a trader there, Mexican trader, and laying there on his blanket is Jedediah's personal pistols. And so they start interrogating him. It's like, well, where did you find these? Where did you get these? And he says, Comanches. And trade with the Comanches at that time was illegal in Mexico. Not that there was anybody up there that really is going to put a stop to it, but Comanche really comes from the Spanish term for enemy. It's based off of that. And anybody that traded with the Comanches were called Comancheros. And so
And Comancheros were pretty cool. They had lever action 1892s in the 1830s.
Oh boy, we're not going to get into that. So
Sorry, go ahead.
So anyway, yeah, he was a Comanchero trader, and he went out there and traded the Comanches and got Jedediah's pistols. So it was pretty well assumed at that point that the Comanches had found him and killed him. And even though Jedediah Smith was a seasoned Westerner, knew better than to ride off by yourself, because everybody that rides off by themselves all usually wind up in the same place, dead.
Yep.
And he was no different. Because, old Bill Williams, notorious for going off by himself and doing things.
Mm-hmm.
He was always trying to be away from people.
He made it a long time, though.
He made it a very long time until he decided to make enemies with the Utes. He'd been friends with, and he's one of the few men that the Utes were friendly with. There were a few out there, but there weren't a lot of men that the Utes were very friendly with. And when he betrayed them, they made no qualms about bringing about his end. But apparently they had so much respect for him that after they killed him, they took him off and gave him the burial equivalent to that of a chief. So there was still some respect there. But the story goes of his betrayal is that they asked him to take a bunch of furs down into Santa Fe and Taos and trade them for goods, and he went down there and took the furs, sold them, and got drunk. Then decided that instead of facing them and owning up to his mistake, he would fight him. So he led I don't remember if it was Fremont or who it was, but he led a group of men to go out to fight him, and he got wounded. He come back to El Pueblo because at the time there was a little adobe fort, and it competed with Bent's Fort, not by much, but it was there. It was called the El Pueblo. Not a very nice place to be. Think of it as the Sodom and Gomorrah of the plains, but he holed up there for a while and then decided to go up and recover the goods that they had cached after he had led Fremont up there, and they about had a Donner Party incident. And while he was up there, the Utes found him and killed him. He never come back out of the mountains. And so, yeah.
The Tennessean said, "Howdy, folks." So we're at 124 right now. You want to run it till an hour and a half?
Yeah, we could do that.
All right. So you guys got any questions? Throw them out there. Constitutional. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, but yeah, I've been adding a lot of books to the inventory. So we're not running out of things to talk about. This is the newest one I got in, which I got this one just to see if it added anything to it. And it basically is kind of a brief overview of all the Indian wars. They start out with the Minnesota Massacre. I wish they would have started with Grattan Fight and worked up, because really that was kind of the mark that would go on.
Why would you start with Minnesota? You missed Sand Creek and, well, not Sand Creek, but you missed, Grattan and all that.
You missed Grattan and them. Yeah, I don't know why they started it, but yeah, they start with Minnesota Massacre.
Not that I don't.
Actually,
think
they started with the some of the treaties that took place out there, but then they go into the Minnesota Massacre. Yeah.
I think the
with,
Minnesota Massacre is overlooked a lot, though, too. I mean, I'm
It
glad
is.
they included it.
Yeah, it's overlooked, but Grattan really gets overlooked. Battle of Ash Hollow or Massacre of Ash Hollow gets overlooked. Blue Water Creek. So yeah, but that was one that I've been wanting to read, so I got it. I kind of read a little bit of it tonight, and it's not bad.
I'm pretty sure 90% of the people know about Sand Creek, Washita, and Little Bighorn, and that's it.
And that's pretty much what it covers.
Oh, yeah. Constitutional Carpenter said, ahoy, just got done watching Big Jake checking in. Guns of the West, Dustin's in. Hi, Dustin. He said, hey, fellas, sorry I couldn't get here earlier, but at least wanted to pop in and say hey.
So this is a new one. This is the one I'm really excited to read. It is To the Pikes Peak Goldfields, 1859, by Leroy Hafen. And Hafen is another one of those that's kind of a dry read, but he's got good stuff. He's not as dry as Lavender can be, but this is actually diaries. It's a compilation of diaries and letters that all have to do with the Pikes Peak Gold Rush. So this was one we're going to take care of here one of these days. I added number 10 of 11 of the books from Covered Wagon Women. And this one covers 1875 to 1883. The last one covers all the way to 1903. So there were people still traveling the country in wagons, emigrating in 1903. But I was going to get number 11, but they had it for a little too high of a price. But one of these days, we're going to go through the Covered Wagon Women series, because that is an absolute wonderful series. It's women's diaries. Some of them are very rough. Some of them are very well written, but lots of good information out here. One thing, though, is like I'm not going to go into each individual book, because the women from 42 is when they start, through 1850 something, they say the exact same thing. Got here, found good grass, paid outrageous prices at Fort Laramie. And then this one I just got. This one was, I think it was Paul Hedren's first book. It's Great Sioux War. He's got books that get more in depth, but this is kind of his first overview book. That's a good one. I got one that said it was in really good shape, and then it's not in that good a shape. It's all bent and pages are all messed up in it, but you can still read it. One of these days when we start getting more into tribes, been getting some of those. The Crow Indians is one that just came in, and I've read some of that, and that one's pretty good. And then the ones that I'm really happy I found. You don't find these for the price that I got them for very often. So this author, Charles Robinson III, decided to publish a multi-volume series from the diaries of John Gregory Bjork. He got to number 5, and it was published in 2013. The problem is that he died in 2012. So what was supposed to be an 8-volume set stopped at 5. But these books are still being published. They usually go for about $50 a book. They're not cheap. I managed to get 4 of the 5, and I think I spent like $35. The one I'm missing is the one in the middle, number 3. And $91 is what it was listed as, the cheapest I could get last I looked. So it's going to be a little while before I get that one, because it covers Crazy Horse and the Cheyenne Outbreak. But I got 2 of them right now. Number 4 and 5 are on their way. And these things have a lot of detail. My goodness. It's like this first volume covers, and it's only like 400 pages, but it covers 1872 to July 28th, 1876. And then volume 2 goes from July 29th, 1876 to April 7th, 1878. So there is a lot going on in these books. And then Dog Soldier Justice. This one's about Susanna Alderice. And this was in the Kansas War. So I think this was, it's late 1860s. Yeah, she was killed in 1869. So it talks about her ordeal. So this is all Western Kansas in the late 1860s. And I've got a few more that I bought, but I'm not going to dig them out. But this is the last one I've got, which is Frontier Regulars by Robert Utley. So this one covers what the soldiers did out here from 1866 to 1891. It is the second part. There's another book that that precedes this, which is, I think, Frontiersman in Blue, and that's 1840 something to 1865. So all great material. I got plenty to go over for Tales of the Trails for a long time.
Yeah. Our Desert Boy said there is a Bill Williams River in Arizona. I see sometimes he's called Old Bill Williams in some references.
Yep. The reason why he's called Old Bill Williams is because his name is William Shirley Williams. And so he was called Old Bill. And Old Bill Williams, we got to do a program just on him because he's an interesting character. Mm-hmm. He started out life as a young boy up at the Fort Osage, doing stuff with the Osage Indians, becomes a Methodist circuit preacher, and then decides to come out west and trap for beaver, and turns out to be one of the most foul-mouthed drunkards that you would see around out here, and apparently made no squabbles about what kind of meat was put in front of him. Meat was meat, whether it was human or animal, because there are rumors that he did partake in cannibalism, and I wouldn't doubt it one bit.
Only a haunch.
Yeah. So you know, you don't eat a trapper that fine, but one ham at a time. So anyway, we've got plenty to talk about. So I have no idea what the next Tales of the Trail is going to entail. Open to suggestions if anybody's got them, and yeah, we'll come back here, and actually it won't be more a couple weeks because I'm going to go to Wyoming. I put off my Wyoming trip. That's why I'm here tonight.
I'd be interested in hearing about the Cheyenne outbreak myself.
And I do have a book on that, and I wanted to get Bjork's diary on that. So if you can come up with $91 between now and the next Tales of the Trail.
Yeah, I know that is.
Because that's the one that really, Bjork's diary is the one that's the one it covers, is the third volume, and that's the most expensive one because, like I said, that covers Crazy Horse's death and the Cheyenne outbreak. I'm guessing that's probably why it's the most popular.
Okay, yeah, we have a few things here. Constitutional Carpenter said Duke Frazier is a wealth of knowledge. He wants to know, is that stories from a dog-faced pony soldier?
Yeah. Oh, boy.
Louisiana Gray said, I'm glad to see you have plenty of material to choose from for future episodes. Jeremy,
and this ain't nothing.
Yeah, his library is pretty extensive. Jeremy P said, I'm looking forward to more history discussions. Really enjoyed this. Jersey Red said, hey, you Duke.
Hey, Jersey. Yeah, no, I've got a serious problem. I've run out of bookshelves. I have books sitting on top of the shelf because I ain't got no shelf to put them on. So my next project this fall, besides rebuilding my bathroom, because it's just a disaster, is I've got two big windows here that just seep cold air like a sieve. It's too cold to rip. I waited too long. It's too cold to rip the one window out and put a wall there like I wanted to. So come spring, I'm ripping that out, putting a wall there. Then I'm going to build a bookshelf up on that wall so that it goes from the floor all the way up. Right now, it's just under the window, and that's the other thing. I'm worried about that window leaks, and so I don't want to put too many books on there of value. So
you got a boat to build.
I got a boat to build. I got a bathroom. Bathroom is priority number one. Because sitting there, going to the bathroom is like sitting in a rodeo. About 8 seconds is all I can handle.
Don't get thrown. Okay.
Yeah, thrown off the throne.
Tennessean said, good night, folks. Okay, so Vaquero Joel said, would you all be able to publish a bibliography with all of the books that you cite in your videos? A lot of time I'm working on something while listening and can't write them down as you mention them.
Well, I could start to do that. If you wait a few years, I might get them all listed on the list. No, well, I keep adding to them, And some of the stuff I get information from, especially with Indian Wars, actually comes from vertical files that we have up at Fort Laramie, and some of those are research papers that were donated. Some of them are articles that were published years ago, and they've been out of print for so long. One of them, for example, is one called the Wild Reshaw Boys.
Mm-hmm.
I have not been able to find that except for, and I made a copy of it. I said I'm not leaving Fort Laramie without my own copy. So I copied it off. And then nice thing is when I worked for the feds up there at Fort Laramie is I had access to JSTOR, so I had access to publications and stuff that you only access if you buy a JSTOR. And thankfully, when I worked for the feds, they already had the subscription, so I got a lot of that stuff. But yeah, there's a lot out there. But yeah, I could try to one of these days put together a bibliography, but I got a good start to a bibliography. Just watch my YouTube shorts. They're the least viewed shorts I've got.
Yeah, you got reviews on them.
Dog must be dreaming. She's sitting over here barking and twitching her feet.
Constitutional Carpenter said boat, BOAT, break out another 1,000.
Yeah, I'm trying to keep my grandfather's boat from going to the dump. He built it in 1965 out of plywood and fiberglass, and I'm trying to save it. I'm going to have to probably put about $3,000-$4,000 worth of epoxy into the boat, penetrating epoxy, so that I don't have to try to rebuild the whole thing. But one of these days, I'm going to have that boat on the water.
Well, that boat's kind of special to me because I thought you were dead and gone for about 1.5 years there, and then one day you showed up on YouTube fixing a boat.
Yep. And that boat's still sitting under the thing. Got new tires on the boat.
Yeah.
On the trailer, but no, that's going to be a project for this summer.
Yep.
Because I decided, I'm going to stick with the job I've got now. I'm not going to get into what that is. Basically, a security guard, but I ain't going to get into any more than that. And year-round pay, I got a 401k. I'm going to stick with it because after 10 years with the federal government, they didn't even give me squat. So,
Saboteur wants to know how goes the buckskin suit.
Well, there's a bunch of deer hides in the freezer that are waiting to get tanned.
So about the same place it was 3 years ago, Saboteur.
Yeah, I keep adding hides to it, but I don't. I've got to start scraping on them come this spring because that freezer is full. I can't get another hide in there.
Yeah. Constitutional Carpenter said, picked up Powder River for my father. Thanks to your suggestions.
Yep. Powder River and also Rosebud goes with that. So Rosebud basically picks up after what happens after Powder River. But yeah, great books. I wish Hedron would write one on the Horse Meat March, but Jerome Green has a good one. It's called Battle of Slim Buttes. That one pretty well picks up and covers the Horse Meat March very well. But I've got a ton of books over here. One of these days I want to kind of go over California Joe Milner. That's going to be a short chat because there's just not a lot known about California Joe. And then what's his name? Captain Jack Crawford. He's an interesting character. He traveled around with not Wild Bill Hickok, Buffalo Bill Cody. And he was up in the Black Hills during the Black Hills Gold Rush and wrote letters to a newspaper that were published back then, kind of telling the daily life of camp life out there. So that's one we're going to get into. But no, I've got 300 books, something like that, 200 books, 150. I don't know how many books I got. I got a lot of books. We're going to cover a lot of stuff here, so this ain't going anywhere anytime soon.
Yep.
So my question is, what do we expect from 11 Bang Bang here Sunday?
We haven't put out a video in a month and a half. I want to say the wheel lock, but every time we get close to it, something comes up and we don't do it. But I will say that the Trapdoor series is ready to go. Be a couple weeks. But got the voiceover for that. I got the voiceover for a lot of stuff, actually. Got the guns all in. make some bullets, and we're starting on that. So that'll be at least a couple of weeks. Ethan
So you
had
got the
something.
1870 carbine in?
Yeah, no, I'm not gonna. I will mention that in passing, I believe. I don't have $17,000 just laying around to buy one of them. But yeah, no, everything's in. Even got the High Arch 73 in today, so that's everything.
You know, you could always just buy one of those cut down ones that looks like a carbine.
We've talked about that, yeah, because honestly, if we found another 1870, the 1870 we have right now has the end of the stock smashed. So if we were to find another one, which they're pretty rare to start with, there's only 12,000 of them. But if we
Right.
were to find another one, we might cut that one down to a carbine, seeing as it's already smashed on the end.
Right. Well, hopefully we can film another collaboration here come spring.
Yeah.
Or after the first of the year, because trying to play and figure out what I was going to do, and I think the one plan I was going to do, I'm going to hold off a little bit, but we'll go out there when I got a few days, and maybe I finally get to shoot a trapdoor conversion.
Yeah, pick your pick. There's 1, 2, 3, 4. We got 6 of them of the conversions. So.
The Allens?
Yeah.
Well, heck, you can give me one of those for Christmas.
We got the 65, 266s, the 68, and the 70. Well, there's 2 68s and a 70, so that's technically 6 if you consider the 70 a conversion, which most people don't.
Right.
But yeah, 50 70s, there's 6 of them over here. So
nice. Yeah, that would be fun to shoot one of them. So
they're I like the 50-70 better. It's a softer push, and it's a bigger bullet, and it hits harder, and it's just I love that round. It's a great round.
Now, if you get a chance to go deer hunting, you ought to take that along.
I ought to. Actually, I probably would take. The funny thing is, I have that Bannerman cut down in there behind the door. That's the best shooting out of all of them.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a really good shoot. Handy rifle cut down to a little bit shorter, even
right.
though it's not period. Well, it is period too, but not mil-cert period, I guess you'd say. But,
right. Oh, that reminds me, because we've talked about, I was going to talk about that tonight. We might as well. We'll go for 2 hours. What the heck? I don't have to be anywhere to you.
No, not necessarily.
Okay. So I sent Garrett a text here. I don't know if he remembers the thing I sent him or not, but we was discussing that, we've discussed before that at Adobe Walls, when they did the archaeology, they found a handful of 45-70 shells.
Yeah.
And we're sitting there, it's like, oh, it's 1874. That's really early for 45-70 shells. And so I was perusing around. I think it was on Facebook is where I found it at, one of those groups I'm with on there on the Indian Wars and such. And some guy, I don't remember who it was, otherwise I give him full credit, but they had posted a thing that it's out of a book. I don't know what book it is. Basically states that the government was issuing to buffalo hunters, if they wanted, free 45-70 ammunition and a rifle to go with it.
Huh. That's pretty sad considering how slow the military was getting rifles and ammunition for that gun.
Right. The thing they don't specify. So there is a caveat to all this. I'm not saying that this is the absolute definite answer how this got there. I don't know when they started that policy, but it would make sense that if you've got a bunch of 45-70s there, and it's not just, a handful like somebody out shooting it was a pretty substantial number, or I should say fairly substantial number. Enough shells that one guy in a fight with that round, that'd be just about how many shots he would have fired with it. So it'd be the answer to that question. And it could be some cowboy was out there and thought, I'm going to sit out here and shoot rocks, and had a trapdoor and he just starts popping rounds off. Who knows? But when I found that, I thought, man alive, depending on when they started that could answer that question of how did those 45-70s get there?
It very well could. I mean, it would still be when was this, what month? June?
Yeah, it was in the summer. Yeah, it was the summer there.
I think they started shipping them in May. So, it's possible. I mean, They shipped a bunch of carbines out in 73. Carbines came first, which is weird. They never did it
Right.
that way. But with the 73 trapdoor, they shipped a bunch of like 2,000 carbines out in late 73, and then they roll into the rifles in 74. So it's possible. It is
It's a
possible.
possibility.
I would find it, if I was a soldier, I'd be mad because there's a lot of soldiers still running around with 68s and 70s because it took
Right.
forever to get that supply of 45-70 cartridges to the soldiers. But you're right, it probably could be.
But in one term, it makes sense that they sent the carbines out first because the Cav at that point, most of them are still armed with Spencers.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas your infantry, they've all got trapdoors. There was only 1,000 1870 carbines made. All right,
300.
300. 300. Okay, yeah.
330. They were only experimental, really.
Yeah, they were testing. So in 1870, it was the trapdoors. It was rolling blocks and sharps conversions. They sent it to Cav units, just small Cav units, to figure out which ones are going to perform the best, and the rest of them are still armed with Spencers. In fact, I think the second Cav had Spencers up until 1874. I think, if I remember right, Company K, the second Cav, had Spencers up until 1874. Custer's, the seventh Cav, had Spencers up until probably about 1874. So I forget which one. I think the fifth Cav down in Texas, they were issued some of those. I don't remember if it was the
70s. Texas is where those 70 carbines went.
Okay, so they got because they got those. I forget. There was another unit in Texas that got some of the rolling blocks.
Now the Ward Burtons were single shot bolt actions were issued to the cavalry for.
That's right. Yeah.
Earlier they were 1870s, so 71, 72. Even the 7th had them for a little bit in the Yellowstone campaign.
Yeah. So lots of interesting stuff. So, well, I guess we don't have to go for a full 2 hours, but yeah, it was just something that popped up there, and I thought, that might explain why those are there.
It's a very good chance.
Who knows?
Information.
It's one of those things that we weren't there when it happened, and we may never know the answer.
Yeah. Or it could have been somebody in 1902 with a Marlin rifle, whatever action.
Could have been. And, but I think, you still saw it. Here comes the 920 train right on time.
That's all nostalgia when you're streaming from where you're at. You get to hear the train.
Yeah, well, you could hear them up there in Wyoming, except I was a little further away from the rail line, so they weren't as loud. But yeah, it's one of those things. Like, did Custer commit suicide? Well, we don't know. We weren't there.
Right.
So
Oregon Outback said, "Okay, last guess: Homer, Hooplehead, Frazier."
Oh, jeez. Yeah.
Oh.
So, anyways, all right. Well, I think we're going to shut her down there for the night, boys and girls, ladies and gents. I want to thank everybody for coming on. I said we're probably not. I'll probably not have any long format videos for a long time, but keep an eye out on the shorts because our good old friends Billy Yank and Johnny Reb have been back for a few episodes, and there's a new series out there.
They're bringing more with them.
Yeah, actually, I forgot. That was the other thing I was going to do is announce that. So if you haven't watched the shorts already, we've got a new group of characters come in called Frazier's Rangers. So yeah, we kind of introduced them with a little Billy Yank and a little bit of a mishap with a saber. So anyways, yeah, I'm going to keep trying to upload those. It's one of those things that whenever I have a funny thing pops in my head and I'm here at home, I just grab the camera, grab the clothes, jump in, let's go. I film a few of them, and then I might not think of anything for a long time.
Is Billy Yank going to have a fancy new hat for a while?
So I was going to order one of those this week, along with a new uniform, because Billy Yank may be getting a promotion.
Oh,
Um,
spoilers.
yeah, we'll see. His promotion may get delayed for a while. But this
After
cab
all
helmet.
those Merrill carbine cartridges that he lost, he's getting promoted anyway.
So on this Cav helmet, I kind of forgot that I promised the guy I was going to buy it, and so he got a hold of me, and I sent him a payment, and then I sent him the last payment here this last week, and then I got a notification that says, "Hey, you're behind on this bill." And I thought, "What? How can I be? I shouldn't be behind on a bill." And went and looked. I was like, "Yeah, I'm way behind on that bill because." Apparently, when I hit the submit button on my phone, it did not submit. So I went and did it on the computer, and everything was square then. So between that helmet, those bills, my book buying habit, I looked at my bank account and I said, well, he's going to have to just use the same old cheap Amazon hat for a little while longer.
There ain't nothing wrong with it. It's his character.
No, yeah, it's just a character. But then, oh, I forgot who it was. Somebody told me that Billy Yank's glasses were getting pretty dirty, and I thought, you know what? That's going to be a great little skit. That'll be the next one. I don't know if I'll film it tonight. Well, if I don't film it tonight, it'll be another week before I do it because at the place I'm working, I work night shifts. 3 days a week, it's 2 to midnight. 1 day a week, it's 9 p.m. to 7 a.m. I have no time to mess around in the evening. So, yeah, those are going to still keep coming along. And then I'm going to start doing book reviews again, even though they don't get hardly anything for views. Still like to do them. That way people have a good idea what to find, what to read. So anyway, been trying to shut this thing down for the last 15 minutes and we still ain't got there.
Yeah. I think we're pretty well done with the comments, though. Other than Constitutional Carpenter said fancy hats are a requirement.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So, and I got to start saving up because putting in for antelope tags with my best friend next year in Wyoming, and that's not going to be cheap. And I also have to buy my clothing for the event that I'm going to probably be partaking in at Fort Larned in May. And I still owe a buddy of mine a substantial amount of money for a Sharp 63 conversion that we may see on the channel in a long video. I'm hoping I can get that paid and picked up in time to go see Garrett them. And then we can all sit out there and film.
See how many cameras and tripods we can shoot with it.
Yeah, see if I can pick off a GoPro at 1,000 yards with a 45-70.
Oh, I actually the other day I about topped myself because I nicked the chronograph too.
Oh,
Ethan, you just shoot from now on. I've had enough for a while.
Well, I tell you what, you boys, if you ever buy another one of those GoPros, make sure you put the accidental spill insurance on it.
Probably had that on this one. I don't know. I've never thrown it away yet. It always sits right here by the computer, ready to go.
Yeah, no, you can't throw that away. That's a trophy right there. I got the other trophy sitting in the back from that little visit.
Oh.
I'm going to make a European mount of that here one of these days.
Oh, Kaido Izama.
Oh, hey, Kaido. Long time no see. Hey, I got your email the other day. I've just been so busy, I forgot to respond. But yeah, I don't know what the deal is with the comments. It was probably because you had a link in there, if I remember right, or a reference thing. But yeah, your comments never show up on my videos. So that, or like you said in the thing, they've got you marked. So, but anyway, I did get your email. Just wanted you to know I did get it. And one of these days, might do actually, I think I know what I'll do on them black powder bullet tests. I'm going to be going out to Kansas here eventually. I'm going to take it out there, and we're all going to shoot it.
Yeah, we'll put it on a known range and see what we do at 350 yards.
I don't know if they'll go quite that far. No, we'll just go out and do it out there. Heck, that'll make life a lot easier for me because right now I don't have access to a range except for one free one that's 45 miles away. And last I was out there, it's overgrown with weeds. I don't want to shoot black powder at it. So, but we'll go out there and we'll do that out in Kansas. Gonna be a lot to do in just probably 1 or 2 days.
Yeah.
So, all right, I am going to shut her down here now. I want to thank everybody once again for coming on. Like I said, if you got any questions, comments, concerns, throw them in the down or just comment them down below after this airs out there, and we'll try to answer them. Yeah, thanks everybody coming on. And just before we go, how many have we gotten up to?
We topped out at 45. We're at 36 right now.
Yeah, that's not too terrible.
I think that's about as good as we've gone for the Tales of the Trail.
I think we had one that beat it before.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah. So just kind of keep an eye out on both our channels. You know, Garrett and them, they're doing a lot more regular than I am, because they're up to 20,000 viewers, and I'm sitting here still can't even make 10,000.
Yeah, we're not even doing anything. It's
just luck of the draw.
Yeah.
So anyways, thanks everybody for coming on. Stay tuned. Probably won't be 2 weeks. It'll probably be another month before we have another one, probably right after Christmas or just before then. Mm-hmm. But we will have another Tales of the Trails, and we'll go over another topic. So y'all take care, stay safe, keep your powder dry out there. Have a good one.